emotional maturity is a way to live within the world that honors complexity and differences and lives in integrity and doesn't need to shy away from difficult moments in conversations. It shows up for those in truth. Hello, and welcome to the True Northing podcast with Allison
and Kristen.
We are excited to talk to you about emotional maturity today and talk with you, have a conversation together. In this conversation, in this episode, we're really going to be diving into what emotional maturity is, what it isn't, and how it differs from emotional intelligence and capacity, something we've been talking a lot about.
So why don't we start with defining emotional intelligence, emotional capacity, and then emotional maturity, because they happen kind of in that sequence of development.
So, emotional intelligence is our awareness of what emotion we are feeling or possibly somebody else is feeling. It's having a whole library of reference for the different emotional experiences we can have. Some people have really kind of limited emotional intelligence. They only know that they're sad or they're mad, but emotional intelligence can include such a range like shame or embarrassment or excitement or joy. Like it's this kind of library of awareness of the different emotions that we have and being able to recognize them within ourselves.
Think of it as a skill set. So you can learn it, you can study it, you can understand emotions, yours and other people's. But somebody with that emotional intelligence, that understanding of emotions, doesn't necessarily consistently apply it. So those can be different things. So it's more of that skill set. You learned it, you got it, you understand.
It's an intellectual skill. It also connects the mind and the feeling. So it's mind and feeling, being able to connect those two and have that self-awareness. Emotional capacity or capacity is something that we've been talking about and studying a lot. And it's really the ability to feel the range of feelings that we have. So, not just identifying, but feeling, allowing, experiencing, understanding, developing more insight to our own experience and that of others, being able to tolerate and have nervous system capacity or development to be with a full range of life's experiences.
Right. To be able to hold and process emotions. So you can think of it as the bandwidth, the container for emotions, which is based off of nervous system development, attachment style, and wounding from childhood.
Mm-hmm. It's the ability to, when I say like tolerate discomfort, it's like yes in the moment, but also the discomfort of reality and the discomfort of past experiences, the discomfort of looking at ourselves, the discomfort of what happens in relationship. Yeah, it's like how we're expanded through life and can exist and be regulated within that expansion.
To be with an emotional experience without reacting, without shutting down, getting defensive, getting stuck in the self protection. So, to be able to be with an emotional experience, to hold the emotions, to process them, So somebody can understand, they can have emotional intelligence, they can understand what they should do in a moment or how they should respond to an emotion. But then having the capacity is the ability to actually do that in the moment. Your nervous system can actually hold the emotional experience in real time.
It's taking it from, like, the mind to the body, like,
Mhm.
or, like, the mind to, like, practice, like, "Oh, man, like, I know I should be able to allow myself to feel anger," but somebody with low capacity might just totally shut down when they're having a feeling or somebody else is having a feeling, so they'll blame, deflect, deny, avoid, all different ways that that can show up internally and externally. And then moving on to emotional maturity, it's inclusive of both intelligence and capacity. So it's this development into maturity, which is then how we respond and act out and communicate through our actions our capacity in relationship.
Yeah, think of it as your track record, your pattern of taking responsibility for your emotions and for your behaviors, taking action, following through. It's your ability to actually put into practice the skills and the capacity, the container. You understand emotions, you can hold emotions, and then you can actually show up consistently in a mature way in response to the emotions that come up.
Repair is such a key word in accountability. It's being able to communicate where maybe you fell short or what you're working on, what you need to step into, and then doing those things. The action meets the words, the action meets the work. And we were having a conversation earlier about like consciousness. It's like consciousness, being conscious of yourself in the situation applied in action consistently over time.
Yeah, so I like thinking about these 3 as a progression, and they definitely relate to each other. So emotional intelligence is knowing the map, the emotional landscape. You know it, you understand it. Capacity is having the fuel and the bandwidth to stay present and experience the emotions. And then maturity is actually making the journey, actually applying that and taking steps and showing up consistently. So you can have intelligence without capacity. You can have capacity without maturity. True emotional availability in relationship requires all three.
Something that's quite nuanced here that Kristen and I have discussed is that sometimes people can show up in a way that looks regulated and mature. Maybe they're able to express accountability or take a pause when needed or make repair or seem open to your feelings because they're mirroring you, but it lacks true depth. It's almost like they've skipped from emotional intelligence to what's more of what we would call like a performative emotional maturity versus a true emotional maturity. So, emotional maturity really does have to go through each of these stages. Like it is a progression, it is something that you develop the skill set for. True emotional maturity doesn't bypass feeling and it doesn't bypass capacity or truly being changed through the experience or impacted.
That feels like an important piece because I know I have definitely experienced people who can say the right thing or validate or mirror, right? They can bring these skills forward in a way that looks like they're really there with me and on the surface may look like emotional maturity, the way that they're handling it. But it is performative or it is a way of controlling the situation, trying to make it go away. It's more about appearing a certain way, being the good boy or the good girl.
Yeah, it can definitely be about image management. Exactly like you said, they want to be the good boy, they want to be seen to even themselves as being a good person. And so their apologies are more about managing the other or managing the experience versus about being transformed through the experience. So it's more about disconnection, more about control, more about doing and saying the right thing versus being expanded and transformed and changed and healed. Like it's not a healing, it's kind of robotic in a way.
Yeah. It's not really reaching the depths.
It's a mask.
Mhm.
It's a mask of saying all the right things. But usually with that, it's not changed behavior over time. It's more of just trying to say the right thing versus any true reflection, self-reflection, really being with the other person. Yeah, having like a level of attunement. There's a lot lacking in that when you skip capacity.
It's interesting to think about someone not having capacity, but appearing to be emotionally mature from a performative angle. So, not really truly emotionally mature, but they appear that way. Maybe it's somebody who doesn't have capacity, meaning they are easily overwhelmed in an emotional situation by your emotions, by your needs in the relationship, by their boss's requests, whatever it is. They can't hold the emotions in the moment and stay present and regulated. But then maybe they're really good at following up for the repair. And it comes from a desire to self soothe, really, not a real desire to hold themselves accountable, but they're showing up for the repair in order to make the uncomfortable feelings go away or make sure that you are viewing them highly.
Mm-hmm. So they're really avoiding emotional contact. It is actually like an intelligent avoidance strategy. So it looks like they're validating you. It looks like they're understanding. It looks like they're making repair, but they never truly feel and are impacted by the experience. They're just doing and saying the right things. Or maybe they're just saying the right things. I think those are some of the most scary people, actually, because sometimes when people are emotionally immature or don't have the capacity, it's just so obvious, right? They're reactive, they're defensive, they're blaming, they're rude, whatever it is. But then there's people who may really seem like they've got the tools, but it's not applied in experience. It's applied through intellect. And it can be really confusing because they're saying the right things, but they still don't have emotional contact.
So, if there's a rupture in your relationship, say my partner did something that felt really inconsiderate, felt hurtful to me, I bring it to their attention and they are able to apologize. They say, "Okay, I'm really sorry that I hurt you," whatever it is they need to say that I'm looking for in order to repair in that moment. But then they do it again a week later, the same thing. And then I have to remind them, that thing, you did that last week. That's actually really hurtful to me. Now you've done it again. Yeah, 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 I get it. That's right. I totally forgot. I understand that's hurtful to you. I won't do it again. And then they do it again. So that to me is somebody who is not emotionally mature and does not have capacity, because capacity means being able to hold space and awareness of somebody else's emotional experience. And so they might be doing the performative task of repair and saying what they're supposed to say in order to keep the peace or maintain a good image in your eyes. But they aren't actually being impacted by what you have shared with them. And if they were being impacted by it, then they would think twice before they then did the thing again. They would remember the emotional experience that the two of you shared and that it was hurtful to you. And they would think about that.
It requires a certain degree of presence. And that ability to think before they act is, or for us, before we think, before we act, requires that maturity. So, an example of maturity would be maybe in a heated moment where somebody said something hurtful. Maturity has the capacity to feel, but it also has the presence to pause, regulate, and then respond in a way that honors the experience, acknowledges impact, and creates a healing field, lives out a new imprint of behavior that includes awareness of impact. Takes a while to get there, guys. I mean, if you if you haven't, and most of us haven't, and I know for myself, I grew up in a very emotionally loving household, but very emotionally immature household. So when things came up, disagreements, challenges, conflict, it was not handled in a way that facilitated repair, facilitated more trust, facilitated more security. And I see that as a culture as a whole is that we don't have modeled emotional maturity regularly. As we've kind of mentioned these different steps like emotional intelligence, emotional capacity, and then building to emotional maturity, we are really simplifying it through these words, but the practice and application, it requires a lot from us. It requires self awareness. It requires nervous system development, which takes time and practice. It requires learning healthy communication skills. It requires empathy. It requires self trust. And these things are like muscles that we build over time. But to know what we're working towards, like emotional maturity, is when you can have that relationship that you desire that has the depth, that it's not avoiding conflict, that you can still have things come up, but that there can be two different people in the relationship that have a lot of love and ability to love each other through conflict in a really aware and deep and expanded way.
I think about capacity actually as the foundation. Somebody's nervous system development stemming from childhood, which connects to their attachment style, it connects to their childhood wounding, like all of that informs their nervous system development, their ability to meet challenges and emotional experiences, to hold them and to process emotions. That really lays the foundation for the other things we're talking about. For somebody who is then self aware, who can self reflect, who can look internally to the deepest, darkest places and trust that they'll be okay, somebody who can hold somebody else's emotional experience at the same time as their own, somebody who then can educate themselves on emotions, activating that emotional intelligence, building and developing that. And then it almost seems like the maturity piece could come quite organically once you have the capacity and the intelligence. If you're somebody who wants to be in relationship and in deep connection with someone else, then that maturity piece comes online. Well, then I know I can identify a problem that's right in front of me, or when it's brought to my attention, I can see it, I can acknowledge it, I can hold it, I can do the hard work of figuring out how to navigate it, and then I can apply it to my life. That maturity, taking that action. How am I going to let this emotional experience change me? How am I going to intentionally, consciously show up in a way that is in integrity with what I now understand?
That's it. How can I show up in integrity with what I understand now? It is maturity is that integrity to everything that you've learned and practiced. It's living it in your day-to-day actions, in relationship, in conversation, in conflict, when you have an upsetting situation arise. It's the integrity to practice what you know and what you've experienced and what you've developed. And I do believe that it's a natural progression. I do believe that it comes online after developing capacity because you have now been carved out through experience and awareness and understanding and regulation. And it is a skill set to learn how to live that and communicate that. What I love about maturity, emotional maturity, is that it's has room for the full experience of truth. So it has room for compassion for others and the ability to set a limit. You can show grace, you can show love and still say no. There's like a lot of room for nuance and love and care. I think sometimes with emotional intelligence or even capacity, in a lot of therapeutic kind of context these days, or maybe like more like pop psychology, is like that there's kind of like a self protection that comes in around experience where like people will maybe develop capacity for their own experience, but then like shut down to the world in some sense. But emotional maturity is like a way to live within the world that honors complexity and differences and lives in integrity and doesn't need to like shy away from difficult moments in conversations. It shows up for those in truth.
Would you say emotional maturity is the ability to recognize what is mine and what is the other person's?
Mm-hmm. It's like
So
the
when
practice of that and the communication of that.
as we've been talking about this dynamic of the person who's overcompensating, over functioning in the relationship, being paired up with somebody who has low capacity, it would seem that that person who's overcompensating has a lot of capacity, has more capacity than the other person. They are taking responsibility for themselves, their part in the dynamic. They're actually maybe even taking responsibility for the other person's parts too. They're working really hard. They're bringing self-awareness. They're taking action. They're giving grace. They're doing all of these things to hold the emotional landscape of the relationship, but maybe they really struggle to acknowledge the dysfunction of that, to acknowledge their own boundary or need for boundary, their own edge, the piece about, well, how much is mine and how much is theirs, and right. And then that acceptance and then that decision making. Well, then how do I what do I do with this? Like that requires a level of maturity that not a lot of people have.
Right. It's the differentiation. It's the evolution from, yeah, maybe being entangled or being codependent or being like within just some dysfunction within the relationship, and then being able to see it and then respond accordingly. Like you said, this is mine, this is yours. Oh my gosh, look at what I've been doing. Look at what we've been doing now. I want to have compassion for you. I want to accept you. I'm going to see this relationship and this reality clearly, and I'm also going to do the tough work of, now that I know, I'm making new choices. I'm no longer filling the gap of our disconnection by overcompensating. And now I'm tolerating the space. I'm reorienting my focus. I'm treating you kindly. I'm acknowledging both of our humanity. I'm also not tolerating these certain things anymore. These are the action steps that I'm doing to not do that. I'm following through. I'm holding compassion for myself, compassion for you, holding myself to integrity of truth, and holding that for this relationship. And if you're not doing that, then my response is A, B, C, D, E. Like it's the action steps. What I love about maturity is that emotional maturity is that it's kind and strong at the same time. It's loving and truthful. I think that sometimes people can feel like if they're honest in pointing out issues, then they can't also be kind, or they can't also be compassionate. Or if they're compassionate, then they have to negate their own integrity and their own truth. And so the emotional maturity is this way that all of those can coexist. I can be compassionate. I can also set limits. I can be angry about something and not react. I can pause and I can still communicate about my anger. I'm not disconnecting from my experience, but I'm not reacting because of it or disconnecting because of it. It's like differentiation and connection at the same time. It's really beautiful.
How can one develop it? You got to start with capacity.
Yeah, well, I think like in some ways, at least for myself, I think that I had this idea of what emotional maturity was because I saw limited examples of it. But I'm like, wow, that's something very different than what I've witnessed. How do people do that? So it's like there's this idea of what it is. And then it's the process of working towards that, which starts by self-reflection, self-awareness, growing both of those things, connecting to your body, taking risks of connecting with others, taking risks of speaking your truth. Nervous system regulation is so huge, and practice making repair for when it didn't go right, and then holding yourself to a certain standard of that integrity.
Allowing yourself to be changed by truth. And sometimes the truth is, I'm really struggling to follow through on this thing or to even allow myself to be impacted by my partner's request or this conflict, this tension we've been navigating. I'm noticing resistance to that. So bringing that self-awareness and then that accountability. Okay, well now I have to take some kind of action to address that. so that I can show up consistently with integrity.
Feels to me like such a personal commitment, like such a self-honoring personal commitment that we make to develop ourselves. And what's beautiful is that we don't like we have immature feelings. We have immature reactions. We have, and I think sometimes people think like, oh, well, if I become mature, then that really invalidates my feelings. That can be more immature. We all have those, right? Like people are scared to invalidate themselves, but it's this beautiful way of honoring all parts of ourselves and giving ourselves the gift of being able to communicate those things, to understand ourselves, to understand others. It feels like self-care.
Feels like love.
It's like love.
Love for self, love for other, love for truth.
Yeah, love for the things that even seem unlovable. Like we're not disconnecting from those emotional parts of our self or disconnecting from truths that feel really important to us. It's like bringing ourselves closer in and then like taking the action steps to really honor ourselves, honor truth, honor love, honor our connections, honor other people, like honor humanity feels like it's just such like human loving skill set that we learn to honor ourselves, honor truth, and honor others. And I think that's what I was talking about of more like pop psych is like pop psychology is really focused on self honoring. And I feel like maturity is a way that we're honoring ourselves and others and life all at the same time. That's maturing. And that's also capacity in action. Capacity in action equals maturity.
Yes,
Yeah.
capacity and action.
Capacity in action. That's it.
I love
Capacity
it.
in practice. Capacity practice.
Well, this has given me a lot to think about. I'm guessing it's given a lot of people things to think about and consider.
Mhm. I know. I'd so love to hear people's questions. What makes sense? What doesn't quite make sense? Like what's coming up for you? Do you have an experience? Like I really want to hear from you.
Yeah, what does it stir up? Let us know. Thanks so much for tuning in. We look forward to chatting with you next week.